Hey writers, one of the hardest things for students to do after they've got a down draft of their initial ideas for their paper is to figure out what they're supposed to change to make it better for an updraft. Sometimes when you get ideas down on paper, you look at them and you're like, I don't know, that's the best way I can say this. That's as good as it gets for me. And that's not true. So I'm going to show you how you can look at something that you've written, usually step away from it for a little bit, like you let it sit and then you come back to it. That's why revision means like re-seeing, right? Like you're looking at it again at a different point in time. And so we're going to look at an example of a downdraft and the changes that you make to it to turn it into an updraft. So you have something concrete to guide you in that process of making your writing better so that when you give me the final version of your research paper, I can see these changes and see that you got everything down like you were supposed to, and then you fixed it up to make it something polished, something that you want to submit for a final version. So this is the original downdraft from the Janis Joplin example paper. So it says on January 19th, 1943, Janis Lynn Joplin was born or is born in Port Arthur, Texas. The world unaware of how much of a force to be reckoned with this girl would be. Janis's parents supported her artistic side, and despite the torment she received throughout her school career, Janis never stopped being herself. Her problems in school began when she advocated for racial integration. Her hometown was strict racial separation. Not only did she get bullied for her hope for equality, but Janis really never did fit into any part of the mold of the typical young woman of the 1950s, which is what led to her being such an interest in the American public later in the 1960s. She was picked on for her weight and her odd appearance in school as well, becoming intensely interested in art and the blues. Janis, like many youth today, found comfort in music. So it's a pretty good downdraft, right? Like she's got some quotes in there that she's integrated Ferrari style really well, but it's still got kind of a downdraft feel to it. You've got like never really did fit, some like conversational sounding language, some kind of places that it just reads a little bit weird, right? Like when she's got this, her problems in school began when she advocated for racial integration, comma, her hometown with strict racial separation. Like it just isn't reading quite as well as it could yet, but the pieces that you need are all there. So I'm going to show you what the updraft now looks like. So anything in red is something that was changed. Obviously, like marked out means we got rid of it. And then there's some other moves that were made here to make this read better, right? Instead of having that kind of weird comma here in that first sentence, changed it to a dash. Now we've got something fancy stylistically happening there, same words. One of the big changes that needed to happen between the downdraft and the updraft is changing anytime this student referred to Janis Joplin as just Janis. We got to replace that and turn it into Joplin. This is not somebody that you've like had coffee with or hung out with before, right? You want to use their last name to have that level of formality that you need for this kind of academic writing. So use your person's last name when you refer to them. You don't have to do first and last every time, but don't just do their first name. That sounds real weird, and you don't want to be doing that in academic writing. So we've got places where that change was made a couple times. The sentence that had kind of the weird quote integration thing happening here, we changed to her problems in school began when she advocated for racial integration in her hometown with strict racial separation. So we just changed that comma and kind of made the sentence read a little bit better to make sense there. Instead of saying in that overly conversational language, Joplin really never did fit into any part of quote integration there. Change that sentence to not only did she get bullied for her hope for equality, but Joplin never fit into the mold of typical young woman of the 1950s, which led the American public to take an interest in her later in the 60s. So you can see the words that were taken out to make it sound less conversational and more formal. And that's the kind of thing you're looking at. Like, how do I make this sound better? What words can I get rid of to get to my points faster? This sentence was like, she was picked on, and we changed it to students picked on her, right? You're getting rid of what's called passive voice, and you're making the students do the action to get rid of that verb of being. That's something that is a big deal in narrative writing, especially, but it carries over into academic writing. You want to try to avoid using is, was, were, unless it's, like she was born in, like that's kind of an okay place for it to happen. You just don't want to do it when you don't have to. So if you remember, our rule for other papers we've written has been to get rid of half of the verbs of being that you have in your downdraft when you're fixing it up. So you can see some other places, instead of just saying becoming intensely interested in arts and blues, that felt like it didn't really go with the information about her being picked on. So that sentence got edited to say students picked on her for her weight and odd appearance in school as well, and she became intensely interested in art and the blues to distract her from the taunting, right? Like you add that kind of like thinking that's happening in your mind but maybe doesn't show up on the paper. Like this is what I'm talking about. Instead of like focusing on people bothering her, she went and focused on these things to distract herself. And then the biggest change probably that I want to point out is the way that the closing sentence of that body paragraph changed and moved that closing sentence to be the topic sentence actually of the next paragraph. So you can see the original is Janice, like many youth today, found comfort in music. We've got some music stuff, like going on there when it says that she started listening to it, but the whole next paragraph that this student wrote is about the comfort that she found in music and who her musical influences were. So to make that work a little better, you sum up the body paragraph we were working with about kind of what school was like for her and what she tried to accomplish by saying while she looked for ways to support others, she still needed something to bring comfort to herself, right? So she's like got this stuff about how she's trying to make life better for people in her hometown, but she's also being picked on in school. So she's got like, how do I comfort me, right? Self-care kind of vibes. And so we rewrote the closing sentence there, and then the topic sentence for the next one, Joplin, like many youth today, found comfort in music. So it's playing on this comfort word both in the closing sentence here and the topic sentence here to keep that connection and make the reader feel like, okay, that makes sense. And that's the teacher word that you hear, flow. That's how you accomplish that. You keep the word or some kind of continuity between the ideas in your different paragraphs that the reader can easily identify almost subconsciously, right? Like it just, when you use the same word twice, I recognize that there is a pattern there. So those are some very specific ways that you can think about to look at your own downdraft body paragraphs as you go through the process of fixing them up. That's the kind of stuff you're looking to do. There are so many ways that you can change the initial version of what you got. And sometimes maybe it doesn't, like not every sentence needs to be changed. But there is always room to try to say it in a different way or to try to use a different sentence pattern to get the idea to the reader faster or in a more clear way or with better, more academic vocabulary. There's just so many different revision choices you need to be making to show the changes that you attempted and the effort that you made between your downdraft and your updraft.